I am not the main character in their life. I am a character in their life, and I hope to be a strong one, but I am not the
Yeah.
only one. And that is a very difficult thing for parents to process.
That's one of the most important things about conflict. It's not getting the other person to understand you. It's getting you to understand yourself and the situation with new eyes, which is hard because that's part of our identity. We see ourselves in a certain way with a certain belief system and certain stories about who we are. And oftentimes the biggest conflicts are the ones that challenge our identity, challenge our beliefs. And when we care enough and we're curious enough, we can actually upgrade our mental operating system of who we are and what do we believe. And that's where the most significant, like life-changing growth happens. And sometimes things need to get really bad for us to have that degree of breakthrough. I don't believe that that's necessary. I think if we can have awareness and some tools on how to do this effectively, we can increase the metabolism of our growth and evolution much more quickly. But I don't know. I've never learned that, which is why I wrote this book, because I had to do it over the course of 15 years. I was like, what are the key principles and techniques that help me do that more effectively? And figured other people might be interested too.
How has this work helped you with your parents? So I'm just curious with that conflict, how has this impacted your family life with your mom and dad?
Yeah. Well, oh,
Deep
it's
question.
funny.
I went right for the
Yeah,
jugular on
no,
this
I
one.
love
I'm just
we're off
curious.
drifting here. Great. So it's really, really interesting. So my mom has dementia. It's pretty progressed. So there's not too much going on now with that. But one thing that I realized, and there was a lot of therapy involved in this, but my mom and dad have these very different yet very complementary, sometimes unhealthful complementary, and I think a lot of couples do.
Yeah.
You know, my mom was like overly flowing with love and care and but like what my therapist called emotional enmeshment, which is like there would be like too much emotion like pouring into me. And then, you know, my dad was always very supportive of me, and as time went on, like, I started to demesh myself emotionally from my mom, and, like, it was okay to upset her, and it's okay to say what I need and say, "Yeah, I know that's really important to you, but it doesn't feel right for me." So that took me years. And then interesting, like, I played football in college, and this is, like, fast forward from that big fight. So I'm in college, it's, like, 7 years later. My dad, you know, is kinda depressed, and what he loves, loves, loves is come I went to Ithaca, coming up to Ithaca and watching my games, and I was like, "I don't wanna play football anymore," but I was terrified to tell him because I was like, "It's the only thing." I mean, this is my story, right? It's
Yeah.
the only thing that brings him happiness. It's my responsibility to make sure that he's still happy. He's my dad. It's like I do this thing and it makes him happy. And it was a really hard thing for me, but I actually spoke with my mom and I said, "I'm really struggling with this." And she said, "Your dad only ever wants you to be happy. And he would choose that in a heartbeat." And I told my dad, and of course, he was like, "Yes, like, of course, I want you to do what you want to do." And as time has gone on, I've become more confident and comfortable in my own views. And, you know, I'm still staying curious, but my dad has very strong opinions about things, and I'll let him express them and I'll challenge them. And I have more agency when it comes to my relationship with both my parents. And I'm much, much less, I'm so happy to be able to say this, much less concerned with other people being happy with me, other people liking me. Um, and I can live with it's so liberating. I can live with such greater authenticity and say, you know, when you said that, kind of made me feel pretty shitty. Here's why. Or I don't want to do that. I know you really want to do that, but it's not what I want to do, you know. So that has presented that kind of patterning with my parents as well over the years, more and
It's
more so.
it's a great answer. I think what also is really interesting is it's really important in conflict in general, but also with the familial environment to separate from a parent's opinion or a parent's your parents often will respond a certain way, and detaching the ability to define who you are through that opinion is, I think, something that's really interesting. And what I mean by that is maybe your parents have strong opinions about something and you completely disagree with it. And every time they talk about it, you have this emotional response. I think everybody has this, right? And it's really interesting, though, to be able to allow them to have their opinions. You often don't put yourself in their scenario, their life, their upbringing. We're looking for our parents to be perfect. Once we realize they're imperfect and we accept them for who they are and they're not defining who we are, but they
That's
all want what's best for them. I mean, I my sons both play sports and there's nothing I love more, to your point, there's nothing I love more than watching them play at all, like nothing. But at the same time, all I want is for them to be successful, productive humans and for
right.
them to find happiness in that life. And so
On
my
their
goal is to, on
terms.
their terms. They have to find it on their own version. It's not my job. I am not the main character in their life. I am a character in their life, and I hope to be a strong one, but I am not the
Yeah.
only one. And that is a very difficult thing for parents to process, but it's also good for life because it helps us realize in corporate America that your opinion isn't the only one that matters.
That's right.
Detaching from the result is not a bad thing. So it is an interesting dynamic, and I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah.
You
Happy
wrote
to.
down something. I think you had a good thought. What did you want to make sure
Oh,
you
I've
you
been
hit?
writing down things all along the way. Well, I
Oh,
mean, the thing that came up as you were sharing that is our identity is such a huge part of conflict, as I mentioned before. And where do we learn our identities? Well, we learn our identities primarily through our upbringing. And I was just thinking about like my grandma and grandpa on my paternal side grew up in Brooklyn and, were young during World War II. My grandpa was a little older than my grandma, so he was at this age where there was the Great Depression. He was in his teens, and then there was World War II, where he was a Jew in New York. And I remember going to my grandparents' basement, and there would be these Medaglia d'Oro uh, tins, like these coffee tins with red pen caps, another one with blue pen caps, another one with paper clips. And the greatest motivating emotion that we have is fear, right? That's why we avoid conflict, because we're afraid that we're going to not be accepted and we're going to be marginalized and shunned, and a relationship, a community, whatever, will be pushed out. So, and you were talking about this, and like my grandparents, they did the best they can. There was a lot of fear though. Don't do that. Don't touch this. You got to be a doctor. You got all these like tropes of like who you have to be to keep them safe, right? And then I think both my mom and I mean, my mom had her own story. She grew up with an alcoholic mother and a dad that left. So there's a lot of unpredictability there, right? So we want to like control things. So they both made tremendous progress from their parents and did a much better job, like you were talking about with your sons. I'm 85%. If you could be 90 or 95%. So just that sense of like identity, when we can really kind of take off the lens that we use to look through and actually look at that lens of like, oh, my parents this, my grandparents that. These are their beliefs. This is why and I'm different. I'm a sovereign being. And I see these things similar. I see those things differently. Then we start to take responsibility for our life. And that's a really exciting inflection point. Of course, it's not a light switch, it's more of a dimmer switch. But some of us never even start sliding the dimmer switch to a deeper place of agency and responsibility for our life. And that's a shame.
yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think being able to look at it through their eyes as well is so valuable. I mean, imagine growing up in the environment that they grew up in and how they had to start from scratch, or the concern or worry that they had and how that shapes the next generation. We're in a generation right now where the kids have not seen any major challenges. I mean, COVID was the biggest challenge, and that was us being locked up in a family environment together, And it was definitely challenging, and lives were lost, and there were other things that happened. But in actuality, there hasn't been major war, there hasn't been major challenge. So the free flowing entrepreneurism is like just growing, and people are using AI to create stuff. And sometimes my boys will be like, "Why are you so worried about spending on little things that are ridiculous?" And I'm like, "Well, I grew up without a whole lot." So the
Right.
way I see the world is I remember my father riding his bike to work every day in 100 degrees. Like, you didn't see that. So I never got into cars. I get into having a car. There's a big difference, right? Having a car is different than wanting luxury cars and luxury watches and things that a lot of people our age, as they succeed, start to do. My boys like, "Dad, why don't you ever do these things?" And I often go
Right.
back to the set of eyes I grew up watching. And so I love that. And I think it's a great peek into conflict, though, because I also think being able to put yourself in someone else's shoes is just such a powerful thing. And it goes back to that curiosity and that understanding that will allow us to have a little bit more grace in these discussions, even if they're disagreements.
That's right, and what you did with your son was really beautiful in that, like, you could have just said, "Why are you," like, your son's like, why are you so, like, hesitant? This is like a $20 thing. What's the big deal?" You could have been like, "Money doesn't grow on trees. Like,
Yeah.
I'm the dad.
I'm
Like,
sure I said
don't
that
ask."
too. I'm sure I said that many a times. Let's just get that out
Sure.
there right now. The imperfections are there, and I certainly said
Totally.
those things younger, but as I got older, it got more into sharing the story. Giving the truth
Right.
is something that helps so much better.
And in that specific example, you created this opening to be seen and for your son to, like, see more of your lineage and how your story came to be, and maybe even you realize, "I'm actually not there anymore. We're actually okay. I have been worrying about money, and that's a worry from a reality of 10 years ago." And this is the magic that happens when we get outside of the world and hold on to, like, that identity so tightly. Every conflict, when handled well, gives us an opportunity to expand into a better version of ourselves and creates the opportunity for someone often that we love dearly to more deeply understand who we are and for us to more deeply understand who they are and where they're coming from.
Yeah, I don't know how you grew up, but in our house, nobody talked about money because it was scarce and it made everyone uncomfortable. And so I did the exact opposite with my kids growing up, where we talked overly about it. And, I shared major things with my kids and have for many, many years. And it was part of the same thing. Like, I did some of the things the opposite way because I wanted them to see the world in abundance. So when those things come back to you and it still
Mhm.
makes you uncomfortable, it shows that just because you were working towards a better goal, sometimes you still have to work on yourself. And
That's
that's the
right.
other part that I know you bring up in here, is that there's a lot of internal work that you're able to see through conflict.
Yeah, interestingly enough, we have we have multiple dimensions of conflict, if you will. So it when we think about conflict, it's like two people yelling at each other, right? Probably the most significant place to be curious is the internal conflict. To be aware of it. So sometimes we're not even aware of it because we don't have a great relationship with our body. How does our body feel? And we just jump to the mind. And when we jump to the mind, we often don't, like, have any opportunity to tap the brakes and say something's off here. So our body is the thing that lets us know something is off, right? So what is ideal in the perfect world is we start within. We don't start externally, we start within. What feels off? Why am I feeling, like, really frustrated, aggravated, angry, scared, whatever? What's going on within me? And then getting clear on that. Oh, like, we're having this conversation about doing X, which might cost me, 50 grand or whatever it is, then I don't get to do this thing that I wanted to do. Or, okay, all right. So what happens when we're in this state of conflict, when it becomes like when we get flooded, like emotionally flooded, it's because we're not orienting. And this is a really important concept for everyone to be aware of. When we don't know where we stand amid a situation, it can be very overwhelming and we can get into a fight or flight, freeze, follow mindset. Our survival brain will kick in because we don't know where we are. So one of the most disorienting things is I don't know why I'm feeling so emotional about this. And that in and of itself is scary. And then if we're not in touch with that, then it's outward. Then, I'm attacking you or I'm shutting down or whatever it is. It's an unhealthy response amid conflict. So the very first thing that I need to do is to say, whoa, time out. What's going on within me? And understand what happened, what emotion am I feeling, what's the story I'm telling myself, and what do I need right now? When I can do those things in that order, I am now oriented within myself. I get it. What I need is to make sure that we don't spend until we make this money or have certain amount of cash flow, or with a kid, like I'm okay with you doing this, but like, you know, I'm good with us getting a pool, but I need to know that you know how to swim first because I'm scared. I've heard all these stories, whatever. But until we get in touch with that, it's not going to be a productive conflict. So once we need to get in touch with that, and then externally express that. Here's what happened. I saw you get really excited about getting a pool. I love the excitement. I'm realizing, what's coming up for me is I know like two families that have lost kids because of drowning. And it's like, I just realized like that got me really resistant to that idea. So I love the idea of a pool. I think it'd be really fun. What I need is for our son or our kids or whatever to know that they're super confident and capable in water. When that happens, I'm good. Are you okay with that? Yes. Okay, great. Then we have a starting place. I'm oriented within myself and then I orient the other person and then we know, okay, here's where we are. Where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's really powerful. I will tell you, side note, when our kids were pretty young, I think my youngest was 1 and my oldest was 4, we bought a new house and it had a pool. And I did not want the pool because I didn't want to have to take care of it. Just flat out, I wanted no more responsibility. And my wife was like, "No, no, no, I grew up with a pool. This is gonna be the greatest thing that we ever did." And I said, "Okay, sounds good." And she has done a phenomenal job of maintaining and managing that pool our entire lives. But our kids have had so many phenomenal memories in and around that pool and our family parties and the things that have developed. To this day, my boys come back from college and the 4 kids in the neighborhood that they all grew up with come over and play pool basketball, except now it's at 9 o'clock at night and the music's blaring and they're sitting around the fire pit. So,
So
I mean, they became extremely great swimmers through having a pool. So it could work both ways, and it was a matter of just taking that and owning that. But it was really just a side note because I know sometimes just fun to have these conversations when you're going through things and having it with an outside person. It is phenomenally impactful to have that in the house if it's something that it is dangerous and there are things you have to be aware of. So YouTube has this cool feature where they pick the next video for you, and it's right here on this screen. So I hope you enjoy this next video.